Today, I want to talk about how AI is going to replace most video agencies over the next few years. And I want to start by telling the story of how I started my video production studio and have scaled it from 0 to multiple 7 figures and working with a lot of well-known brands now on larger projects than obviously where we started. Talk through the evolution and the steps of most video production agencies to get to where they are today or where they want to be, and then how AI ties into that. At the end of 2014, that was when I decided to start my own business with my business partner. We were both working in full-time positions at one of the largest additive manufacturing companies in the world. 3D printing, additive manufacturing, the same thing essentially. We were creating all of the video content and the photography and the motion graphics and doing all that stuff as a two-person department. And we were doing great work. We were enjoying our jobs. We were traveling a lot. We were, young. We didn't have kids at that point. And, we got to travel all over the world, Dubai, London, all over the place. Germany, we spent some time there as well. And, on the surface, everything looked great. Like we were doing all this stuff. It was all paid for and we got to basically hone our trade. I came into that position with basically zero experience, and I did a lot of learning on the job. I learned a lot from my now business partner, and yeah, everything was going well. But it changed quite quickly. One day we realized that one of the projects that we wanted to work on internally was being outsourced to an external agency, and when we found out how much the agency were getting paid, it really was an eye-opening experience for me. Not just me, but for both of us. But I was kind of more at the forefront of having that conversation around, why are they getting paid so much more than what we do to do our job? And that was really the catalyst for us pursuing our own endeavors. And so I turned around to my business partner one day and said, listen, if one agency is getting paid this amount of money to produce content that I didn't think was too far away from what we could produce ourselves, why aren't we doing some of that? Why aren't we taking a slice of that pie? And that was essentially the genesis of our production studio and how things got started. So, we filed for LLC and we kind of started building. And, in the early stages, we were working 2 jobs. We were still maintaining the full-time positions that we had, just as stability, because we didn't really know how to run a business at that time. It was our first business. And then, obviously honing our skills whenever we could. We were probably being a little bit more intentional about the way that we approach projects within the company, knowing that, one day we will exit and kind of do our own thing. But then on the evenings and weekends, we were nonstop, taking on as many jobs as possible. We were saying yes to everything. Any corporate job that came across, we would take, calling friends and family, asking if they needed favors. And naturally, we kind of fell into weddings as well. Weddings is a fairly common, stepping stone for people who were in our position as a way to hone your skills, make some money on the side. Evenings and weekends are available. Naturally, weddings were the way to go and one of the transition points. But there's always this North Star, right? You don't get into the industry. Well, most people don't get into the industry because they want to do weddings for the rest of their life. They want to do the stuff that they see on TV at that time, more so, but now online. The premium quality commercials that they see online, at least that was our inspiration and our North Star. So we wanted to do the aspirational stuff. We wanted to do the brand level stuff. We wanted to do the stuff that was seen by more people and more creatively fulfilling. And that was always our target. The weddings were definitely a stepping stone. The smaller corporate gigs were definitely the stepping stone to get towards that. But we knew that we had to pay our due diligence and do our time in order to get to that level. I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. So essentially what we did was we built our portfolio of corporate and wedding gigs up to a point where we could quit our jobs. That took a couple of years, if I'm being honest, and ultimately, once we started getting paid more from our side gig, we then switched out and kind of replaced our income with our side gig and quit the job. And then once we had that availability of working during the week, we were able to, take on more jobs, market ourselves differently, and position ourselves as more of a commercial or corporate video production studio as opposed to a wedding videography business. And that was a really important step for us because it was definitely a huge step towards where we actually wanted to go, that North Star of high-end commercial brand content. And so we were doing stuff for free. We were doing stuff, just kind of spec pieces to really figure out the style and the approach that we wanted to do and be known for in the industry. And that was when we kind of started to move up that corporate ladder. We went from maybe making, a few $100,000 a year to getting towards close to that 7-figure mark as we started to bring in more higher brand deals, and that was really a turning point for us. Okay, now let's fast forward about 5 years from that point. We're now probably 8 years into the process, and we are working with these bigger brand deals. We are more towards the top of the funnel, the content that we wanted to create before. We've been steadily growing our portfolio, steady growing our capabilities and the ways that we handle projects, and we're happy with where we are. And now, thanks to the emergence of consumer AI, everything that we aspired to be, every place that we aspired to grow to is now kind of almost in jeopardy of being completely outsourced, and the industry is going to be completely reshuffled from what we wanted to do. I say this because a lot of the stuff that we were aspiring to be was more, let's call it generic, and to a point where you could almost put any company logo at the end of a piece, and it could still be true and still work and be sold as a spot for that particular brand. You know, you can switch out a Nike logo and a Under Armour logo. You could switch out even like an Apple and a Facebook logo. You know, these sorts of commercials, you probably know what I'm talking about when I say this. They are almost indistinguishable from each other in that they don't necessarily have much story to them. Or if they do have a story, the story is so ambiguous that it can be used across platforms. Ultimately, like, you might be trying to trigger some sort of emotion or generate some sort of hype or kind of motivation from a commercial. But ultimately, like, it doesn't necessarily tell the story specifically of that brand or that customer in a way that is, you know, this, I know for a fact without seeing the logo, without seeing any product placements, that this is the brand that I'm watching in this commercial. And this kind of brings me back to the point of this video. The studios that aren't able to showcase the importance of real, authentic human stories are the ones that are going to get replaced by AI. AI tools are already to a place where you can make photorealistic imagery at the click of a button, essentially. And if there's no real authenticity behind the videos that you're creating or the content that's being produced, then you are going to get replaced by AI. That's just a fact. There's no getting away from that. These AI tools can produce similar, if not better quality at 1,000th of the cost of what it might cost a whole production crew to go and capture. And businesses aren't stupid. They're going to see that. They're going to use the tools that are available if it's going to save them money and have maybe the smallest drop-off in quality. They care more about saving money than they do care about that extra 1% of quality. And that's just how business works. And the production studios or content creation labs, whatever you want to call them, the ones that can't differentiate themselves from just the generic type of content that AI can create, are the ones that are going to suffer. There's no getting away from that. Now, the way that I would combat this is really going back to the roots and the genesis of storytelling. Real people, real stories, real emotion being captured at scale in a predictable way that is true to your brand and the things that you have to sell as a business. And as an agency, kind of piggybacking on this, maybe presenting that to your clients as a way to differentiate you from just the agencies that make really beautiful images. Really beautiful images are no longer the differentiator between agencies. Every agency or every business has access to the same quality of images now, or at least they will in the next 6 to 18 months. The tools are becoming so powerful and so much more accessible that this is a guarantee. So how do we differentiate ourselves? It's the story. And we come back to the story over and over again in that your people, your employees, your customers are where the story lies. And if we can lean into that and find ways to creatively use those real people in our stories, that's the way that you can make yourself stand out from all of the other AI generated noise in the marketplace. And if you want to learn more about how you can implement this approach into your business, I do have a free school community down below where we can have conversations around some of the points and some of the questions that you might have. And I also have some consulting and coaching offerings with my website, adamsewell.co, where you can go there, schedule a call, and we can talk through how your business is currently structured, where you want to go, and your future of content. I basically help businesses implement the internal video production studio model into their business so they don't have to hire external agencies anymore, and they can execute at such a high level while saving thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in agency fees by handling things in-house and utilizing contractors and freelancer networks directly without the whole agency pass-through. Now, again, this format of video is kind of new still. I really would appreciate your input. So if you have any comments or questions to put in the comments below, let me know. I'll be sure to get back to every single one of you. I just want to make sure that the message that I'm trying to communicate here is getting through. And if you find value in it, hit the like, subscribe, because I'm going to keep cranking out content like this. And I try to make it as, organic as possible. I don't do any scripting, just make a few notes here and there and then just kind of go for it. So, and if this feels like a good format to you, let me know. Anyway, that's it for today. Cheers.